Welcome to the All Pro Football Data channel. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about who is the next Puka Nacua. Who is the next Puka Nacua? This is a question that is often asked this draft season. Everybody missed on Puka Nacua. Everybody, I mean, every draft analyst that you can imagine missed on Puka Nacua. He was by far the best wide receiver, rookie wide receiver out of every wide receiver that was taken last year. And everybody asked the same question over and over again: who is the next Puka Nacua? And I'm going to answer that question today. I'm going to answer who is the next Puka Nacua by looking at the draft profile of Puka Nacua, who he tested similar to, what were some of the strengths, what were some of the weaknesses in terms of his data profile, and then we're going to look at this particular draft class to see who tested similar. We're also going to look at past draft classes as well to kind of see what Puka Nacua was from a data perspective. And then we're going to kind of get to the conclusion about who is Puka Nacua this year. I know I said that a lot. I'm going to be saying it a lot, so take a drink every time I say Puka or Nacua, and you'll have a fun time with this episode. So, getting to offensive market share data. So this is the first place to start. If you haven't already followed my channel, you can pause video here. But this is his offensive market share production scores. 52 percentile in terms of his receiving market share. Not that fantastic. 61 percentile in terms of total offensive market share and 76.87 percentile in terms of touchdown market share. His biggest trait was his touchdown market share. But when you look at the starter averages, the Pro Bowl averages, and even the All Pro averages at the position, nowhere near those players. So already from Jump Street, Puka Nacua was a decent bit of an outlier based on his overall data profile. Then we get to his efficiency score. So efficiency scores are everything in terms of yards per touch, touchdowns per touch, those types of metrics. And when you look at Puka Nacua here, his TD percentage was above average, and his yards per reception was fairly high. It was almost 90 percentile in terms of that. So he was a very efficient wide receiver. So Nacua had more things in common with starters and all pro and Pro Bowl players when you look at his efficiency scores, not so much in terms of his total aggregated data, if you will. So he was sort of a projection when he was drafted from a production standpoint, a market share production standpoint. Then we get to wide receiver athleticism, which this is even the crazier thing about Puka Nacua, which is that his athleticism was not there. He had a 37.76 percentile explosion score, 45.97 in terms of speed, and 22.47 in terms of flexibility for his size. That is nowhere near the averages at the All-Pro position, Pro Bowl position, or the starter position. For the most part, starting NFL wide receivers have at least 60 percentile or higher in terms of the majority of their athleticism testing. So you have to be above average in something. Puka Nacua was not above average in any single metric. I think speed was the only thing that he was at least close to being average in, and he wasn't even average in that. So here's another situation where is there anything you can really look at here and project him as a best rookie wide receiver of all time? No. Based on athleticism, no. Then you get to his adjusted production scores. This is the area where he kind of looks a little bit better. Adjusted production takes a look at things, like strength of schedule, strength of team, age, those types of things. Taking a look at his adjusted production scores, he had 88 percentile in terms of his age, so he had a decent age score, 65 percentile in terms of MSA, and 78.68 in terms of his pass score. So his efficiency scores really pushed his profile up in terms of his data profile. And when you look at the starter average and you look at the Pro Bowl average, he was in that range based on his adjusted production score. Remember, based on some past videos that I made, the vast majority of 95 to 99 percentile NFL producers at the wide receiver position typically score 70 or higher in terms of their adjusted production scores. So, or the data score, if you will. So he had that going for him. He had, when you adjusted for his age, the strength of competition, all those types of factors, he tested okay. He wasn't terrible, but he tested okay. So his overall market share, from the tree perspective, his market share data wasn't that impressive. His efficiency scores were decent, and his adjusted production was decent for his overall profile. So when you look at this particular draft class, so we're taking a look at this draft class, who are all the wide receivers who met this standard, if you will, the Puka Nacua standard of testing? So we're not going to go into whether or not they're actually going to hit or not, or how likely Puka Nacua actually was, which we'll get to at the end of the video. But these are all the wide receivers who tested in a similar range of possibilities as Puka Nacua. They include Roman Wilson from Michigan, Johnny Wilson from Florida State, Jamari Thrash from Louisville, and Reggie Brown from James Madison. So I would say those are the wide receivers who best kind of are in that similar range. Now, one thing to note though, all of them do not have the same sort of age score that Puka Nacua has. So Puka Nacua had an 88 percentile age score. Every one of these wide receivers is a little bit older. When you look at the MSA rating, I think he's closer to, say, Roman Wilson in terms of his overall profile from that kind of perspective. And athleticism wise, all of these wide receivers, with the exception of Reggie Brown, are all tremendously more athletic than Puka Nacua in terms of his athleticism traits. So, but this would be the standard. Again, if you're looking for who the next Puka Nacua is in this draft class, you're looking for a wide receiver who has inconsistent market share production data, which would be Roman Wilson and Johnny Wilson. You're looking for them to have good efficiency traits, which would be Roman Wilson and Johnny Wilson. I know I keep saying Wilson, but that's their last name, guys. You're looking for below average athleticism traits, which none of those guys have, but Jamari Thrash and Reggie Brown have below average athleticism traits. And you're looking for an overall data grade in the 70 range, maybe a little bit lower than that. I know Reggie Brown is like 62 in terms of his data grade, which is a lot lower than Puka Nacua. But I mean, I just threw him in there because he does have good efficiency scores. So looking at this, those are the next Puka Nacuas. Are they actually going to become Puka Nacua? Well, let's find out. What actually makes a Puka Nacua? What actually makes them? So this is a better example to explain Puka Nacua to you guys from a longitudinal from a forest perspective. These are all the wide receivers that had 90 to 95 percentile production scores in the NFL. And their final grade when they were drafted, not taking into account their NFL production, just how they tested as a college player. Their final scores based on their draft status, based on their data grade, were below average. So when you take, so as some of you guys have seen my last couple videos, you take the data grade, you add in draft status, and it increases your chances of hitting at the position. So these are players that when you took their data grade, you added in their draft status, they had a negative, or at least they had a below average number. So their draft status really dropped them despite having a decent data grade or a non-existent data grade at all. Some of these players, like Dwight Clark, had a below average data grade. Marquez Colston had a 58.3 in terms of his data grade. So you're really just talking about guys like, say, Antonio Brown, Mark Clayton, Eric Martin, those types of guys who were drafted in the 6th, 8th, 7th round. Tyreek Hill was drafted in the 5th round. So guys who were drafted late and didn't have data grades that were so ridiculously high that it helped push them above in terms of their final grade or their final projection based on their data perspective. If you look at this list, just take a moment here. Just take a moment here. When you look at this list, there's not a lot of wide receivers on this list. There's not. You're not going to find 99 to 95 percentile wide receivers in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round. It's not going to happen that much. Not going to happen that often. Okay. And these are essentially outliers. You know, they're outliers. They're players that you couldn't really predict them. I mean, Tyreek Hill at least has athleticism traits to kind of hang your hat on. Colston, I did get some athletic data on him. I kind of have to go back and kind of add it in there again with him, but he definitely was a good athlete as well. But Puka Nacua didn't have athleticism to hang his hat on. He wasn't like Antonio Brown, who had at least above average speed and flexibility. So Puka Nacua was not only in the below average bin, but he didn't even have athleticism to really hang his hat on. So Nacua is the most outlier of the outliers in some ways. Because I don't have athletic testing on Dwight Clark, I don't really have it on Mark Clayton or Eric Martin. So because of how long ago it was. So that is the truth. You want to know who the next Puka Nacua is? There you go. And when you take a look at adjusting for Puka Nacua, for his overall data perspective, from you take wide receivers who tested similar to him in terms of receiving market share, total offensive market share, TD percentage, yards per reception, stuff like that. When you narrow it down into these types of players, this is what you get. You get Eddie Miller, Quinton McCord, uh, Lamartez Brooks, Andre Levrone from Virginia was the closest to Puka Nacua, and he wasn't drafted. And I don't even think he's in the NFL right now. I don't think he ever. Maybe he got a cup of coffee in the NFL. I don't know. But those are legitimately the Puka Nacuas. Andre Levrone would be a Puka Nacua. So the only Puka Nacua, the next Puka Nacua is Puka Nacua. Okay. Now, to answer the question, I know I've said it a lot. Who is the next Puka Nacua? The answer? I'm gonna let you say it. It's Puka Nacua. He's an outlier. Only 6%. So when I went back and showed you that list that had Marquez Colston on it and Antonio Brown and Tyreek Hill, only 6% of those wide receivers who tested with a below average draft status slash data grade, the final grade essentially, went on to put up numbers that he put up in 2023 since 1969. Only 6% of those wide receivers accomplished that. Okay? 6% out of that group that did when they had a below average final grade like that. Based on his athleticism data, where he was drafted, and his overall production traits, he would be considered an outlier. So when you take a look at just his athleticism data, he would be an outlier. When you take a look at his overall production traits, he would be an outlier. When you take a look at every other factor involved with him, he would be an outlier. He's the ultimate outlier of outliers. I mean, there isn't athleticism traits to look at to kind of say, oh, well, he could have made it. He put it all like a Tyreek Hill, like a Marquez Colston. There isn't that there. So this is all on the backs of just good fortune and fall into the right situation equals Puka Nacua. Okay? Okay, guys? So nobody could have predicted the next Puka Nacua. I can't predict the next Puka Nacua because Puka Nacua is somebody who only comes around one time every 50 to 60 years. In terms of like a non-existent athlete, at least below average athlete, with production traits are a little iffy, to go on to become a 99 percentile producer at the wide receiver position. You're not going to see that. It's very rare. Or at the very least, the variables to predict them have not been found yet. So I will give you that. There has been talk about the gauntlet drill. That was something that was talked about at the combine, where everybody was talking about the gauntlet drill, and Puka Nacua had the best gauntlet drill time, and Keon Coleman had a good one too, and all those types of things. So there is that. There is the potential that maybe there's a metric out there that will narrow things down to kind of help us out, but it's not going to help us longitudinally because there was no gauntlet drill back in 1983 and 1985 and 1992 and in terms of the times and everything like that. There wasn't anything like that back then. So, but that's the issue with him. So at the very least, until that time, I don't think there's ever going to be another Puka Nacua. There's only going to be one, and he's pretty good. So, with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. Also, check out my other stuff on Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, at Geometrics. Also, purchase the 2024 NFL Draft Analytics Guide available today. Get it, guys. Really helps support the channel when you buy that guide. I'm going to be having more content coming out, which you guys, I know you guys might be excited. You may not be excited. We'll see. But there's going to be more content coming out that you're going to be able to purchase, which is going to be pretty impressive. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be probably around in July when that's going to come out. But it's going to be about the upcoming NFL season. So make sure you watch that. And for the next couple days, guys, we're going to be talking about the draft, the first round. I'm going to have a video up about the first round. We're going to talk about the second round and day 2, day 3, and then I'm going to get to my draft grades of this particular year, which I always like to do. I probably haven't made a draft grade video in a long time in terms of all the draft classes, but this year I'm going to do all 32 teams. Try to get it done in a week, but try to also not to make too many mistakes with it. But that should be coming down the pipeline. So get ready for a full frontal assault on this particular draft class. And of course, like, comment, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff for the channel because it really helps it out. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.